think we've got enough space.
Right.
Best seats.
This siarad Cymraeg o gwbl?
Right.
So this presentation is supposed to be bilingual dwyieithog, but I don't know if we've only got one more speaker, then we can actually just do it. But personally, I dwi'n hoffi siarad Cymraeg pryd dwi'n yng Nghymru achos it's our language using the country. I like to try and use it when we're down here. But if we've only got one, maybe this fellow will do a bit of both. So and then Martin, I'm going to throw to Martin for a few. If you're doing English, you'll understand what I'm saying as well. So basically,
proper English.
Yorkshire English.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is not proper English.
Okay.
Proper like.
Another Yorkshire man.
Yes. I feel safer. Here in Wales.
Right.
It's me and you.
Okay, so mynd i ddechrau you now. We're going to start in the 1910s. This is kind of when ragtime kind of started out in America. And perhaps you'll be familiar with The Entertainer by Scott Joplin. So that's kind of like a pre-form of jazz, or like if we're talking about what most people think of jazz as like a 30s swing and on, sort of like pre-hi-hat era jazz. So, do you know what a hi-hat is? It's like a part of the drum kit. It's usually a swing pattern, which you might know if you hear jazz going in. So before that kind of came in, we kept time on a snare drum using a pattern like this, basically. So I use that with brush wheel sticks. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that was how we're keeping time in those kind of 1910 period. Some of the, there's no, if you think back to that period, there was no, if you wanted to hear music or jazz, the radio isn't widespread yet. So you're going to gigs or you're having people play it live. And if you're in poorer areas of America, you haven't got money to go to some of these gigs, and you might not have instruments in the house. So that kind of gave birth to the skiffle, well, what we call skiffle later, but like jug band music, which we're going to kind of talk about today and start with, where you're playing the music that you're hearing out in gigs or maybe on the radio at home using instruments that you've got. So if you don't have the money if you start with a drum kit and you don't have the money to have drums, you're going to use what you've got in the house, which you might have a washboard.
But you have to have one to wash your clothes. only the dirtiest houses didn't have one.
So basically that same pattern that I'm going to play that's coming from that early jazz period, groups like Buddy Bolden or King Oliver or original Dixieland jazz bands who kind of the 1910 years bands, and Louis Jordan started out playing when he moved to Chicago or New York? Chicago, I think it was. He was in King Oliver's, but yeah, of course, in Sunset Cafe. He was in King Oliver's band. So we're going to do, and also another thing. So we don't have a drum kit. We've got one. We can replicate some of those patterns. This was obviously added stuff on, but it's all made from stuff you might have in the home to try and replicate sounds that you hear on the radio, or more likely in live gigs if they have a drum kit at all. So. Does dim arian am I gael siomper yn y tŷ chwaith? There's no... Hiya, how are you?
Hello.
Hiya. So you're not going to have, if you haven't got enough money for a drum kit, you're probably not going to have enough money for a brass instrument either, or know how to play it. But you might have, here what we use is kazoos, or you might see people play with a piece of paper and a comb as well. It's like the same idea, trying to replicate some of the brass instruments basically that are on these tracks. Yeah. Okay, so we'll do Tiger Rag first. We'll play quite a couple of cans in Indian Aid and a gig next, so we'll do a couple of songs we're going to do the gig next, because they're like they're good examples of the genre, but we'll try and play some different stuff. And this first one was a song originally recorded by the Welsh and English jazz band in 1917 in Chicago. And it's kind of a good example of that ragtime era stuff where it's becoming jazz and using loads of instruments basically. So I'm going to do washboard on this to replicate where's my silly whistle? To replicate the drum kit, and then I'm going to do to replicate the trumpet. And in that lineup, you'll see I'm going to play this slide whistle part of the way through. There was a trombone player supposed to replicate a tiger roar, and I'll do that on a slide whistle instead of a trombone like the record.
Don't put the original record.
So, trumpet, guitar, using that story. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. tiger, hold that tiger, hold that tiger, hold that tiger, let him get away. Look out that tiger, look out that tiger, where that tiger be?
Low or high ground.
Oh, they'll cry now, play that tiger out for me.
Baby
Tiger
tiger.
roll. 1, 2, 3. Where's the tiger? 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 Where's the tiger out for me? So we were missing bass in the song there. We haven't discussed that element of trying to recreate an old jazz band. We need originally like a sousaphone or a tuba or a euphonium even, if it's big enough, or then going on to a double bass in the swing era. So if we talk a little bit about if you didn't have a bass drum like this, which we're going to demonstrate later, you might have a suitcase in your house if you're traveling or carrying stuff. So if we hit this, it makes some kind of bass sound. And also most houses will have a jug to keep everything in the jug, to keep the liquids in, and so you can, if you blow across this correctly, you can make it sound a bit like a bass drum. So we'll let's do what song do you want to do this way? You want to do San Francisco Bay, don't you?
We could do San Francisco Bay Blues, so that Jack gets to demonstrate how the jug works and how you'd use that jug as a sort of faux bass instrument in a jug band setting. This actually is a tune. It's quite a modern tune. It's a 1942 tune that we're going to use. I know.
Shiny new one.
It's a Jesse Fuller song. Some people don't know about just. Hello.
So yeah, so you can go on now. We play the drum kit. We've heard the washboard that uses a drum kit, and with the same guitar. And we're gonna, if we add a bass on now, you can imagine what it's. We've got a drum kit and a bass made using instruments in the house. But I'm just going to demonstrate using the suitcase and this jug playing across a tune called San Francisco Bay Blues.
In fact, do you know what I'm going to do as well to get that more authentic jug band sound? I'll swap to a regular acoustic guitar, so we're not using the powerful modern resonator guitar. That's you ready?
Yeah.
Francisco Bay. On an ocean liner, not so far away. I didn't mean to treat her so kind. She's the best girl I ever had. She said goodbye and she made me cry. Want to lay down and die? I ain't got a nickel, I haven't got a lousy dime. If she don't come back, I think I'll lose my mind. And if she ever comes back to stay, it'll be another brand new day. Walking with my baby down by San Francisco Bay. Poverty Hall. Sitting down looking at my back door, wondering which way to go. Thought I heard my baby Lord, the way you used to call no more. And if she ever comes back to stay, it'll be another brand new day. You're walking with my baby down by the San Francisco Bay, talking now. Walking with my baby down by the San Francisco Bay, talking now. Walking with my baby down by the San Francisco Bay.
Thank you very much. As you can see, it's pretty effective actually, isn't it? It works as a bass instrument, and it kind of became a whole genre of music where people would have multiple jugs in the house. And there's one of those famous, they were 30 thing, weren't they? Those famous Memphis Jug Band recordings where they had multiple jugs in the same band, and it kind of did a lot of novelty numbers as well. And it kind of Lonnie Donegan kind of copied some of this stuff in the 50s in Britain, kind of the birth of that. We're gonna go forward and do a kind of folk tune-ish style now, but I think I'm gonna throw to you and talk about these differences between these two guitars you've got there. Then we'll do a banjo song.
Then we'll do a banjo. Okay, so I think the band, we are called the Washboard Resonators, and we're named after the instruments. And the resonator is a particular type of guitar that came along in 1926. So, up until 1926, guitars were basically something like this. This is a wood acoustic guitar. This one happens to be a 1929 made Gibson acoustic guitar. Very nice guitar. And we've all heard this sound a million times, haven't we? A lovely, beautiful wooden guitar that just sounds gorgeous. You know, you could play the birds out of the trees with this lovely, soft-sounding guitar. But if you were playing in a jug band, or you were playing a fish fry or a picnic or something in 1925, whatever, you know, you could do your thing with that. Now, people were trying to get guitars louder, so 1923 Gibson started making, Martin, another brand, Martin started making steel string guitars. That made the guitar louder instead of using gut strings. Guitar bodies got bigger. Believe it or not, in 1929 this was classed as quite a big body guitar. The guitars used to be a lot smaller. 1926, a guy called George Beecham, who was a professional Hawaiian guitar player, played guitar in his lap, living in California, went into his local friendly musical repair shop, which was run by two brothers, Slovakian immigrants, the Dupira brothers, and they were already inventing all kinds of stuff and trying to invent louder banjos, picture frame machines, anything they could think of. And he said, I want a louder guitar. And they said, we've been working on something. So they worked together. And what they came up with was what essentially is like a gramophone built into a guitar body. So what you've got here with a resonating guitar is essentially under this cover plate is a metal aluminium disc that's been spun on a mandrel, and it acts like a speaker you'd have in any kind of, like this kind of thing. You've got a speaker in there. Now that works with electricity and magnets. This just
And
works.
there's no electric yet, so that's why.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
Electric.
there's no electricity. This works purely off vibrations. You can probably hear this piece of wood where the strings are. It sounds like you're tapping a microphone. So basically, the guitar becomes its own speaker cabinet. The first ones had 3 cones. There's 2 cones on this side, 1 cone on this side. 1926. This one is a 1935 made guitar with what they call a single cone system. And the idea should be, it's a lot louder than that guitar. You should all be able to hear. If I want to dig in with a thumb pick. So you imagine if you've got like we're talking about these King Oliver or Buddy Bolden jazz bands going on in the late 20s, theatres, brass instruments. The guitar is really a rhythm instrument at this point. It sits with the drums and it plays basically the hi-hat pattern. The guitar is designed to sort of fill out that sound and compete with the brass. Or, not that I'm tuned right for this, but if you're also playing Hawaiian music, you use different tunings, but the idea is meant to be that when you get very loud, kind of and sustainy kind of sounds. So that is where we kind of come in, is that, you know, the music we play, 20s, 30s music, if you were a professional, a lot of the professional guys and gals had the resonating instruments back in the day because it was the best way to be heard. 1933, the first electric guitar is made, which is a sort of, for playing Hawaiian style on your lap. And then by about 1936, 37, companies like Gibson have actual guitars that you play this way with a pickup in and an amplifier that you can buy as a combo. People like Charlie Christian take that forward and turn the guitar into a lead instrument. You can play single lines like a clarinet would, a trumpet would.
I always find it, as like a non-guitarist, I always find it's just interesting because if you think about some of my favourite like 30s can't basic recordings with Freddie Green on guitar, that's like you can hear some of it depending on how it's mic'd, but it's like it's an afterthought, so it's kind of trying to feel like that but nowhere near, and then suddenly it's mic'd up and guitars until then just didn't play lead lines, they were like a chordal instrument, and then this whole thing changed how guitars, basically that gave, being able to play lead lines gave birth to like what is rock music now, playing guitar, because they wouldn't exist if the guitar couldn't play lead lines.
It's about being heard, isn't it? Yeah. So just to finish up on this, the company was National Guitar. I think most people, even if you don't really know about these things, you might know about Dire Straits and Mark Knopfler, and he played one on the song Romeo and Juliet, or Paul Simon sings about on the Graceland's album, the Mississippi was shining like a national guitar. Because a lot of these were made with nickel-plated bodies that are all completely metal and shiny. This one's obviously a wood body. And then there was it ended up being 4 brothers, DePira brothers, and they ended up having a big fallout with this George Beecham guy who tried to kind of claim the copyright for these. So 2 of the brothers went off and formed the company Dobro. Now, most people that come to me that maybe aren't guitar nerds like I am, they come to me, oh, you've got a Dobro, because they've heard of that brand name. Dobro was a company that went off from National. By 35, they actually came back together and bought each of the stocks out and became a company again. And the 4 brothers worked together again by 35, which is the year this guitar was made. Is that enough information? Is that too much information?
That's knowledge.
I could do 3 hours on these things, but I won't.
Right, if we go back, we'll change over to the band.
Yeah, you want that, Jim?
So yeah, Bilingually where the next we're going to do a kind of like folk song style one. We'll do, actually I'll let you talk about this stuff, we'll do that American Scottish tune.
Oh yeah.
And I'm going to, again, if we're going back to like things we were found in the home, the bones were kind of like African and Irish kind of descent, playing these bones, but they link into things you can play in the home to keep rhythm. And halfway through the song, we're going to swap and play some spoons as well, which again, traditional instrument, just leading back into jug band stuff where you're trying to make music from stuff you have in the home basically. And some of these techniques are kind of being lost now, and so I have to try and play a couple of them. So let's just do a little bit down where we normally do it and just extend it a little bit so I can change it to that.
Sure. Okay, we're going to do, this is a song, it's called Cripple Creek, and it was, I think it was first written down and notated, the tune of this song. tune. It was first notated somewhere around 1875 in the Appalachian Mountains in the Virginia area of America. But it's very similar to other tunes that were written down in Scotland in the 1780s, the 1810s, and that were notators. So what it kind of shows is that there's a lot of, obviously, all culture, world culture, that went to America, and that melting pot, and especially in those kind of more backwards places. I don't know, you know, if any Virginians were, any people from Virginia in here?
You're fiddy.
There's a busload of Virginians saying, "How dare you call us a backwoods?" No, I mean, I've been there, it's beautiful, but you know, it's a great example of how, you know, there's British music and things, especially folk music, Irish music, Scottish music, Welsh music. It can all go over there, and I think, you know, one of the things that's interesting, which is an aside to this, is when you kind of take, say, things like country music. You've got yodeling, which obviously is Swiss, Bavarian, Germanic. When you think about those in country music, you've got the dum, dum, dum bass lines. It's very much like what you hear in polka music and German kind of music. It's all in there. Then you think about, sometimes there'll be like what we call threes against twos in that music, which is very African. It all is in this melting pot of what you might call American music, roots music. It turns into blues and jazz and what people used to dismissively call hillbilly music. So this tune, Cripple Creek, you can argue you can see the Scottish influence. You can see it's fully an old American tune, and it's going to go something like
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. If we go to the 1930s, we've kind of reached the swing era by now. So we've instruments become much more affordable, so more people can have actual drums and actual guitars and actual brass instruments in the house, and kind of jug band stuff has become more niche, more kind of novelty. That stuff's still popular as we talk about music in periods of its decade, but everything kind of moves forward in time in different ways. The swing era didn't start in the 1930s and end in the 40s with bebop, you know, like that. So I talked at the beginning about like how the patterns are played on washboard, basically coming from that, from the snare drum patterns that pre-hi-hat, but now we've got the swing pattern that's come into play now, and people like Papa Joe Jones, who was Count Basie's drummer, is like famous with miss the hi-hat and playing these patterns. What else have we got in this one? Yeah, so we've got basically no need for these instruments in the house is not needed now because we've got proper drums. Everything we use in here. When a banjo is modern, isn't it? And this suitcase is a 1970s one. Otherwise, this is a 1920s snare drum, a brass one, and this is a 1930 bass drum. Everything's using real skin heads, so because we didn't have plastic at this time, which is made by people, and they're a completely different sound. So this bass drum is very out of tune because it's cold and wet in here. So
it's Wales, it's the summer.
They have their own. I love playing this stuff, and because we kind of play. There you go. Like, but you can't get that sound from like a modern plastic head or a different thing. They have their advantages. Those first heads that kind of came in the 50s or late 40s. They were called Weather Kings because the main problem with the calf head was playing them outside, and all the marching bands playing drums outside just couldn't. If it rained, all the drums just sank. They just got crazy wet and trying to tune them the whole time. Imagine rope tension drums trying to do that. So they loved them when plastic heads came in and were Weather Kings and playing in the rain, you know. But this bass drum is just over 26 inches, so they weren't, nothing was made on machines at this point, so everything's roughly different sizes, and so everything had to be made uniquely to fit that instrument. But the sound of it is supposed to be, again, in that 30s big band era, the drums aren't mic'd, nothing's mic'd up, there aren't PA systems yet, so the singers, if they are shouting over the band, you have to have loud singers or very quiet bands. So these instruments, like the resonators at that time, they're made to kind of amplify acoustically. So we say with these bass drums, the size they would kind of be felt and not heard. Same as if you ever see a full-size double bass, which you don't see very often these days because they're so huge. Most double basses you see are like 3/4 size. And I suppose you wouldn't really, you'd hear this playing forward to the floor in these rhythms, but you wouldn't really hear that. You kind of feel it through the same as you wouldn't hear the notes that the bass is playing off, and you just hear a low sound. So working with the double bass and the bass drum together, called feathering it. You can hear play like that rather than playing like rock stuff that really digs into the head. You can bounce it off and it kind of just fills the room quietly with it. Gone off on a tangent on drums now. But I think
it's easy to do with you, but yeah, I think what it shows is that back in those days, physically, you'd make the guitars bigger, you'd make the drums bigger, just to make it loud enough to fill a theatre.
To try and fill the rooms.
Yeah.
And then finally I'm using these wire brushes instead of drumsticks, and these basically started off as fly swatters. In America it was so hot, flies, they would try and just swat flies, and then again using stuff in the house, I started playing drums with it, and then it became a whole thing. The drummers wanted brushes, and these are like replica 1930s ones, because they're very light wire, as all that stuff was, and some of the modern ones are much different, bends in different ways than the retractable ones. So we'll play on brushes. You up for I Got Rhythm? Or
yeah, I think
the quintessential swing song, isn't it?
I Got Rhythm is the quintessential swing song, and a lot of jazz people will talk about songs. If you a jam session say rhythm changes in the key of B, because it's just saying use the I've Got Rhythm chords. So there's so many jazz standards that are set to this song.
Yeah, that was a bit of history on that. If you go forward into the bebop era, they used to take the pre-bebop swing tunes and use modes on them, another way of there's a music harmony thing I don't really know about.
Make it hard.
Yeah, but they're modelled on these early tunes basically. It's a much you're playing in a different key on top of the original one, but you're using those same chords, and loads of them use rhythm changes. I Got Rhythm, so if everyone can play along with it as long as you knew what key it was, But it's the melody on top is way more complicated.
But but I think it's 1933 this song came out, and people sort of talk about the 35 as being like the peak year for like when swing really was being like the big pop music thing, I guess, at the time, the big thing. Like people talk about 1977 being the year of punk. It came before, it came after, but that was like the peak year.
So if you notice, you'll quickly notice in this, obviously use of drums. We've got this triple pattern rather than minion patterns. Music theory. We've also got a 4 to the floor in the bass now, whereas everything we've been doing before now has been 2 to that drum band thing we did was going 1, 3, 1, 3. This is now going 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got this 4 to the floor pulse, which was like the swing thing for dancers. Lindy Hoppers and dancers came in, wanted that pulse to dance because you only if you're in 2.
And it replicates the bass line. So when we got ragtime earlier, ragtime came from marching band music, which was popular in the 1850s, 1880s, 1890s. You think of brass bands, that kind of stuff. And then to become ragtime, you syncopate the melody around the bass line, so it fills in between. Now, what happens then is the bass line goes from this two-field, this marching, military sort of style, to being a walking, a four-field, but like a walking bass line. So the bass drum, obviously, and the double bass, the sousaphone, they match it together to dum 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 dum, and make that feel, which those kind of Lindy Hop dancing and swing dancing kind of fits in.
That was important. That's sort of why we'll play this song in a minute. But that's sort of why sousaphones came out of fashion as well, because you couldn't play four to the floor on a tuba. You have to breathe. But you can constantly play. So that's why it came out of fashion. It wasn't a cool thing. You can't play it on the bass. So everything is basically in two. It's using a sousaphone, and then you don't play sousaphone four.
Yeah, that early jazz that you hear of 1917, 1925 recordings, it's all sousaphone, and then really by 1930, you almost never hear a sousaphone. After that, you hear people playing what in America they call a string bass. It's double bass. We call double bass. Doghouse, right? I Got Rhythm, 1933. Or do you want to set speed?
Yeah, I'll do it a bit faster now. But you start now.
You know you set speed.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. To like early jazz and where we from the 1910s-ish up to the 1930s with a little offshoot to some folk music and some history of these instruments really. And this will kind of inform, we're playing at Forum at 2:30 today, it'll kind of inform music we're doing there. So it kind of made sense and a bit of rambling, but is there any questions or anything?
What part of the bones are they kind of rib bones?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so let's say that. Yeah, so you get two. So these are shins and ribs, and they kind of have different. I was given these. It was like I'm by no means an expert in these, but basically, if you like, you can once you learn the grip, you can just apply like drumming movements to them, and then you can match them through. But yeah, so these ones are shin, and they're like much more solid, and these ones are rib, and they've obviously got air in them. Whatever you mean. They're like they can complete different tones.
Treble in the bass.
Yeah. and you can get them made out of wood as well, but these obviously cut a lot more. So yeah, they're all the calf as far as I'm aware. More all calf is my stuff. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Jack's a vegetarian, but this is
closest he gets to meat.
Making use of these things, which is fine and dandy.
Any other questions at all?
Can I ask you what you've got on your fingers?
Oh yeah, all good questions. Yeah, so these are just thimbles. It's like, yeah, and I've gone through, I'm going to do a lot more detail about, I'm doing a kind of lesson and workshop on some washboard stuff tomorrow morning. If anyone wants to come to that one as well, I'll go into detail about what I'm using these. But they're, so people use all sorts. Again, what I quite like about the washboard is like, unlike drums, there's could do another whole talk about kind of history of where like the drum kit came from. But like, basically the drum kit was standardised by kind of the mid-30s, like people like G. Cooper, well he's the foremost guy who like made it, bass drum, a high tom, and maybe a floor tom or two floor toms and a snare drum and the cymbals. The sizes of drums and cymbals have changed. They switched over the years to having smaller drums and bigger cymbals, whereas because time used to be kept on the drums rather than on the cymbals, whereas now we keep time on the cymbals, the drums were bigger. So that's sort of been set, and people have small modifications on that, but like, what I quite like about the washboard is there is no one way of playing it, because it's like, it wasn't designed as a real instrument, it was designed as a utensil, so like however you want to play it and whatever sound you get, that's the sound it is. So I use thimbles, and I've gone through different ones over the years. Basically I like the lightest weight ones you can, because you can bend them to fit your fingers, so if you get heavier duty ones, you think about they'll last longer, but then they fall off your fingers a bit more. But and some people otherwise put gloves on and glue them to gloves, but if I'm trying to I like to try and look old fashioned, so it doesn't.
I've seen people.
A bit like Michael Jackson sometimes.
I've seen people sew these guitar finger picks which have got the holes onto some like gardening gloves, and they can just put their hands into the gloves and play a few songs in the gig on the washboard, and then take the gloves off and go back to the drum kit. Which again is what you're saying. There's a guy who plays in one of my trios who, if he plays drums with us, he just literally holds gun cartridges and plays his washboard.
Yeah, and another good one uses a whisk, which I really like the whisk actually. It's like cool. Another like kitchen thing. So there is also back of the, if you use vintage brushes, you've got metal this on the back, so you can play with that as well. Or heavier duty ones. So there is no way of doing it. It's just the way I do it. It's lightweight fingers.
Last time I looked, they were at 36p on Leeds Market at the haberdashers of those, and you can get your lifetime supply for about 10 quid.
Amazing.
Lifetime supply.
I've got a strange request. It's not a strange request.
No weird questions.
I gave the wrong time. It's my same guy.
Oh,
I said
sorry.
11 o'clock.
Yes.
They missed Tiger that.
Are you going to the gig later?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, we'll play it then, and there's more stuff in it later. It's not just a stripped down version. So is that all right? We'll do it later.
Yeah.
So what drew you to sort of early American music in the first place?
I was always like, so I grew up in Llandailo, so like I had drum lessons in Carmarthen.
That'll do it.
That's it.
I had drum lessons in Carmarthen, and then really famous teacher out there. I'm going to see him on Friday actually, so he's a big influence on me. And like, so I started playing when I was 10, and I was like, by about 12, 14, I was really into like G. Cooper. Like, as I described before, he was kind of my favourite drummer. I don't really know what the sound of. Do you know Sing Sing Sing? Like a really famous, one of the famous swing tunes. You'll know it. It's like it's a big floor tom number. It's still used now. So I heard it on an advert last year. So it's like really famous. And you're talking about big band recordings. There's January 19th, 1938 in Carnegie Hall. Ben Goodman played there. It was like. There's a bit of like racial tension in it because he was like a white. He was like they were white. No, they weren't a completely white band. They weren't never eldership, but like it was a white band playing. What jazz was still kind of looked down on. This was a classical music venue, and they let a jazz band into this play in this venue, and it was a bit of a risk. It was a cold January. I think it was a Sunday, so they didn't know if anyone would turn up. And there was a queue around the board. They couldn't fit all the people in, so it was like. It just kind of broke jazz into the mainstream and swing music, and Sing 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 was the famous recording they did from that, because it's a very niche territory now, but there's Jeff Stacey who's on piano for that person. There's not normally a piano solo in that song, and he did this really quiet, amazing piano solo that like just no one expected swing wasn't like that. Swing was for raucous parties that were supposed to be non-skilled players at the time. It was like
It was
if
seen
you
as
could play
cheap pop music, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Ironically, which when you compare it to say pop music nowadays, it's so sophisticated.
Yeah,
it's not quite
exactly.
comparison.
But, and this recording that it was recorded, there was one microphone hanging in the thing. I don't know if it was given permission to be recorded because it wasn't released about 30 years later. It wasn't like they didn't know it was recorded. But the drums are really well recorded in it. So I heard this is the recording Sing 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 that you hear live, and it's amazing. It's 8 minutes long as well, which I think trying to put that on a you couldn't put that on a record in the 30s, you know. So that was my kind of introduction. I like that stuff, and then it wasn't until I met Martin in Leeds in 2012, 13. That's where you said about going back into more 20 stuff and playing washboard. So that was my intro to this stuff really.
So because you were basically you had these drum lessons and you were playing in the school big band, weren't you? So then I guess you'd listen to big band music, so you play the drums in it, and then that's swing music, big band music is really 30s, 40s. Obviously Sinatra, people like that continued it. Jules Holland continues it now to a degree, doesn't he? And keeps that tradition alive.
Everything kind of changes. So that's kind of the problem of even like doing this presentation today. I wasn't really sure how to market it because if you say the word jazz, like people, it's different connotations. What people think. Like, to me, it's probably jazz. To me, it's probably 30s swing is what I would first think of as jazz. But like other people think, Bitches Brew, Miles Davis, and that's not the kind of jazz I like. Because like exactly.
Jazz is jazz. It's all different. For me, it was my interest in it was. I got really into Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Beatles, Cream especially, and so I was into this blues-based rock music. And people that Jack Bruce was a big inspiration for me as a bass player. When I was a kid, I was playing bass in rock bands. And he'd always talk about jazz, and then my dad used to get Q magazine every month, and you'd read these interviews with Robert Plant or Eric Clapton, and all my heroes, and they'd talk about, the same names kept coming up, and they sounded so mythical, so interesting. Leadbelly, Robert Johnson, Memphis Minnie, and these names just kept coming up. So I'd take my pocket money and go down to Huddersfield. There's a really good second-hand market on a Saturday, and there was this guy that had a massive CD store at the time. So I remember the first one I bought was this blues compilation on CD, and it had Blind Boy Fuller, Blind Blade, Blind Will Natal, and all these names, Robert Johnson, Memphis Minnie. So I bought this thing, took it home, put it on, and I think I just pressed the CD on repeat all afternoon. It was like a Saturday afternoon. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I was like, this is unbelievable. And then I went and started buying more of this stuff, and continued to play bass even into my 20s, into my 30s. I was playing bass. I was playing bass in a signed rock band, traveling around places like Japan and doing big festivals and stuff. But all along, listening to this music, and I think really. In my mid-20s, I started, I had a relationship with my now ex-wife, and she was a jazz singer and a jazz violinist, and she said, and I was a bass player, she said, if you played guitar a bit, we could do some gigs together, and we could, and she liked Leadbelly, she liked Mississippi John Hurt a lot, so we'd start doing those kind of tunes, or doing jazz tunes that she would sing, so I started actually playing that music that I was listening to, even though I wasn't played it, and then turned pro playing this kind of music, and then when I was doing this pro and I met Jack, and I was saying to Jack, like, remember when I first met Jack, and I was like, oh yeah, you use washboard as a rhythm instrument. He said, what are you talking about? And then played him this one of my favourite guys is Blind Boy Fuller. Blind Boy Fuller would play the resonator guitar, and a lot of his stuff is ragtime based. Most of it has got a washboard accompaniment, and it's not until about 1937 that he starts having harmonica accompaniment. And I remember playing Jackson and he was going, what? And the next week he turns up with a washboard he got for 10 quid off eBay. And we went out busking one day, didn't we? We went to Harrogate because it's far enough away from Leeds where we were both living at the time. Yeah. Nobody would know. And we didn't really rehearsal, I don't think. And and then people were crowding around us, and it was like, this is fun. The washboard and the resonator guitar kind of thing combo, it brings back that sound. That a lot of these guys were doing in the 20s, late 20s, 30s. So that's my way into it, and I've been full time for 13 years now, and doing okay,
Nice.
House paid off, and it's good.
Nice.
So that's what it is.
So, Jack, what about the tap dance?
Was that later? I thought about fitting that in today. I had because it fits perfectly into those swingier songs really. Because people first there in the 30s, but those feel good jangles before then. But it's like different style of style of dance.
When would it sort of start?
For me,
No, in general. I think.
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, there's club dancing way back into the 1880s period. It's funny with it's for everyone in this room now. It's like a funny thing with like jazz because it's got so many like black roots really, and like we have this it's just like it's kind of a white, mostly played by white people in Britain now, and you try and understand its heritage and its roots, but we never really will, and it's all like a melting pot of like people would say about New Orleans being like the start of it, and it's like there's one argument for that, but like it doesn't. I don't think there is really a starting place of it, and it's got a lot of slavery mixed in with its roots really. So it's like a funny. You got to try and remember that when you talk about it, and there is no place for it to start, and how responsible Caucasian and other races are for forming this music in a negative way really. It's like so I don't think you're going to say where it starts and where it starts, but it's the people being mixed together, creating a new thing from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of countries. So I don't really know where it starts, but that's the and then it becomes a lot of it becomes popularized through a white audience. And then as everything happens, then there's different races move on to different genres, and then it gets popularized again, but in a current way, and then it happens again and continues to go around.
I think it's very difficult and almost like dodgy territory to try and apply, say, any kind of race aspect to it, because when you think about those cities like New Orleans with the sailors coming through and the different nationalities that are working on ships and the melting pot, it's a lot of things. The chord sequences to a lot of early jazz songs, which people refer to as a one chord, a 6, a 2, 5. A lot of those chords, and then also the song form, what they call it, an AABA song form. That's a pop music song form, and also it's a song form that gets used a lot in ragtime music, which directly comes out of march music, which couldn't be more white or Germanic, if you like, Anglo-Saxon. And those song forms, those very simple song forms, those march songs. We've all heard the Monty Python theme or the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme. Those march songs, how those melodies get syncopated, which is very African American. But the song forms themselves are very based on that.
A lot of that's fun because it has to be written down. It was an educated white person writing them down. They have to be formalised in order to be played again.
But when you read a lot of those books about the early New Orleans guys, like the Pops Foster book? Pops Foster was a bass player that played, through the sort of 1900s, 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, and played in some of Louis Armstrong's bands into the 30s. Pops Foster's talking about when he was a kid, there was these, he talked about there was these picnics that would often happen in the parks in New Orleans, and there would be brass bands playing. He sort of talked about kind of, European music, but everybody used to go to these concerts, and then he talks about how there was reading bands that could read those charts, and then there was non-reading bands, and it's the non-reading bands that would often be the ones that then would draw out these songs and then try to make them what we probably call now funky or danceable or more interesting by taking solos or by playing with the melody, which is where the ragtime comes in. And I just think, I don't know, it's just a music form which was developing 30 years before there was such a word as jazz, and has continued to develop to this day. And nowadays, it's quite funny, there's a lot of Northern European people that are actually at the forefront of what you might think of as like modern jazz or avant-garde jazz, that are taking it forward into even newer spaces. I think like all art forms, if you try and pigeonhole it too much, you get into very, very difficult territory because you can't just do that.
It just is what it is.
It's like trying to grab air. It'll just go through your fingers. It's something else that's not quite as tangible. And I think Pops Foster talks about, he said he remembered people using French rhythms, shostiches and things, and then he also talked about people using a Spanish. I remember in this book he said sometimes people would talk about use a Spanish scale. So that's using like modes where you use notes that aren't necessarily in the scale to make interesting sounds. And I just think that was quite telling to me for a guy who was there in the 1900, 1910, 1920, genuinely playing in bands. He talks about French music, he talks about Spanish scales, he talks about just straightforward brass band music and how that became funky. And when you like when you were saying about those at the start of this thing, which some of you guys maybe missed, those first jazz drumming things, it's military drumming. The military guys used to have a bass drum strapped to their front or a snare strapped to the side. And when you see photographs of the first sort of jazz guys, what they're doing is they're sat in a wood chair like this. They figured out if you put the bass drum on the floor, you can play with your foot.
Well, before that, there was double drumming, so you had to, it was the whole thing, trying to just do working out, and that was down to popularity waning and trying to save money on them. You don't need two drummers, you have one guy to play everything.
And then,
but there's no such thing as a bass drum pedal yet. We need to get those sound
we've got another gig.
So we need to nail this. Sorry,
See you.
yeah, the other guy and